Good morning, folks. As we let everyone get settled in, we're just going to go over some quick IT shenanigans, as always. When we are asking questions, feel free to pop any of your questions into the Q&A portion of the Zoom link here at the bottom. We also, during this presentation, will be using the chat box. So open the chat box when we're looking to connect with folks. And then at the very end, we will reserve a few moments for questions. And if folks are interested, you can actually use the raise hand feature and we will open up our microphones, open up your microphone so you can ask our presenters directly anything that you would like to. So with no further ado, it is already 9:30, so we are going to get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm Amy Wyant from the Otsego County Conservation Association, and we are here today on our very last 2021 Watershed Wednesday that is put on by the Upper Susquehanna Coalition and the OCCA. And today we have Drew Robinson, who is the Senior Communications Manager from the Choose Clean Water Coalition, and Steve Rabb, which is President of OpinionWorks LLC, to give us a great presentation. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it right over to you guys and we'll get started.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. Really happy to present on this exciting project that we're working on. So I'll give you a quick rundown of what to expect, and then we'll dive on in. So first, we're going to give you a little bit of background on this project, this Chesapeake Capacity Builders project. That is a bunch of terms that don't necessarily fit together. What is capacity? We'll look into that. We're going to talk about the survey that we've recently launched and explore some of the high-level findings so far. And then we're going to ask some questions. As Amy mentioned, we're going to have the chat feature prevalent, so welcome your thoughts on that front, and then looking at next steps as this project is something that's going on for the next several months. All right, so a little bit of background on this project. So first, explain who the players are. So Choose Clean Water Coalition, who I manage communications for. We are an organization of 260 nonprofits, nonprofit organizations throughout the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and we work to really harness the collective voices of all of our member organizations, ranging all the way from headwaters up where you all are in the Upper Susquehanna down to Virginia, west out in West Virginia too, all over the watershed. And we see ourselves as capacity builders, helping support our member organizations on a variety of fronts. And we're similar to that front to the organization that we partnered with on this project, the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. And they're very active on the implementation front, getting trees in the ground, working on stormwater restoration projects, and they work as well throughout the watershed on those types of projects. And so there's a series of conversations over the course of 2019 and 2020 that eventually led to the project that we're going to share with you this morning. And really it's identify where the capacity gaps are among the Chesapeake Bay nonprofit community. And when I say the Chesapeake Bay community, that includes approximately 400 different organizations. As I mentioned, the coalition has over 260 members, and the alliance, between their membership, there is some overlap, but collectively between our two organizations, we're reaching around 400 organizations. And really, this project isn't just something that the coalition, the alliance, just thought, oh, we're interested in learning more about where the capacity gaps are so we can better serve our members. That's certainly part of it. But more than that, it's driven by funders. So National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, NFWF, as many know it by, were particularly interested in learning where these capacity gaps are, as it's helpful to them in identifying future funding projects. Future projects to support and fund. And in that light, the project also is supported by the Chesapeake Bay Funders Network and the Chesapeake Bay Trust, two organizations that also are on the funding side of things that are interested in exploring capacity gaps. And to help us in all this effort, particularly with the survey work that we're going to discuss this morning, and also the roundtable discussions that we're going to have next year, we're partnering with OpinionWorks. And Steve, I'll let you share a little bit more about OpinionWorks and and how you all fit into this project.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Drew. Yes, OpinionWorks, based in Annapolis. However, born in upstate New York, we are former residents of Otsego County, and that, much like Apple, OpinionWorks was born in a garage, and so for the first 4 years, it ran out of a garage, and now it's a slightly larger thing that's down here in Maryland. And we're working a lot on bay restoration. We're also working in the Delaware River watershed pretty extensively, and in the area of public health. And in all of these areas, we're looking at behavior change and looking at engagement and helping organizations like all of you and others figure out how to better engage and mobilize your volunteers, your donors, your residents and your watersheds and that sort of thing. So that's our contribution. And in a few minutes, I'll share with you some of this work that Drew is talking about. Back to you, Drew.
Yeah, so capacity, what are we talking about? So this is, we're interested in hearing your thoughts before we dive into how we've defined it. It's been a lot of conversations with all the stakeholders I just mentioned, and other folks that are active in this space to come to our definition that we're going to share in a moment. But before we do that, we are curious to hear what your thoughts are for when we say capacity, what that means. So if you want to drop your thoughts in the chat, we'd love to hear what you all think. Knowledge, technical knowledge for a lot of different funding support, bandwidth.
Literal and otherwise, right?
Yeah. Literal is important these days, huh? Great. Well, I mean, it's a word that we say often, particularly with this project, but it means different things to different people. So it's interesting to hear what first comes to mind for you all. But we'll explore what our definition is. And so the ability of an organization to fulfill its mission. So that's very base level. That could address a number of different factors. But that's how we've come to define it. And what does that exactly look like? Knowledge, technical, as mentioned, knowledge, certainly technical expertise, the tools and systems and resources. Do you have those? And the relationships as well to deliver your work most effectively. So throughout our those 400 organizations I mentioned, there's a variety of different capacity levels, from organizations that have hundreds of staff that can churn out complex reports and have their fingers and has their reach in many different places, to the volunteer driven nonprofit organization that has all volunteer staff that is just kind of wing things along the best they can, and everything in between. So there's a variety of different capacity levels, and what we're seeking to do is to take a broad look at the whole community and identify where the major gaps are, where there are trends, and hopefully that can be helpful in identifying where there are opportunities for us to help, and for the funders in particularly to help fill those gaps. Anything you want to elaborate on that, Steve?
No, that's a great definition, and I'll get into some more specifics around what we're asking about capacity in just a minute.
Great.
And there it is. So why don't I take it for a couple minutes? So, and as I go here, Drew will pop in occasionally with thoughts. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about what we're seeing on the survey, what we're specifically asking on the survey. And I would really encourage you, if you have questions or thoughts, to pepper the chat as we both talk, and or use the Q&A function, because we know that there might be a couple minutes at the end for some Q&A possibly, but don't hesitate to use the chat. So what you're seeing on the screen is, okay, so Drew has put in the link into the chat.
We're going to be sharing this link a lot.
Yeah, right. So this is the survey link that'll get you into the survey. We would encourage all of you, as you have time over the next few weeks, to participate in the survey. Now, this is not, how shall I say it? It's not your 2-minute survey. It's a slightly more involved engagement. So get your cup of coffee, sit down, and spend the 15 or 20 minutes that it'll take to do this at some point between now and December 3rd, and share it with your colleagues. Because, you know, one of our great interests is making sure that the voices from further upstream are heard in this whole thing. We hear a lot from organizations that are big and are active down at the main stem of the Bay, but I think it's really important to make sure that everybody is part of this. So anyway, we launched on October 21st. That is 6 days ago. You know, it's last week. So this is all very new and fresh in terms of results. I'm actually going to share with you in a minute some early results, very early. So this is just sort of trending, you know. Things will shift and change as more people participate. But it's open to everybody, so that's why we're encouraging support or participation. So Drew, let's go to the next slide.
And just real quick to add on to that, we're saying it's open to everybody, and that certainly means the organizations, but also the variety of different people within the organization. So we're not looking for one response from each organization, but also you can be multiple people from the same organization. We ask up front, you know, what your role is. So whether you're a board member or an executive or your program staff, because this is a lot of these questions are about perception. Some of them are objective, you know, how big is your organization? That's something you can quantify, but a lot of these questions are subjective in nature. But while that's the perception is reality to in a lot of cases, and by having the multiple perspectives from even within the same organization, that can really paint a broad picture. And just as a side note to that, we're not going to be looking at individual organizations and saying where the disagreements are or anything like that. We're going to be looking at all these results in aggregate. But we're encouraging you not just to share it or not just to complete the survey yourself, but also to share it within your organization for folks that you think would have valuable perspectives to add.
Okay, so there are 6 big areas of capacity that we are exploring, and these are driven by the interests of the funders and by the 2 major partners, the Choose Clean Water Coalition and the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. And so in the setup to this, we did some formative interviews with key people who do a lot of thinking about capacity across the watershed, and people who are, let's say, reviewing grant applications, grant requests, or who are in academia and thinking about what organizations need. So through the aggregation of those formative interviews, we settled in on these 6 major areas. So through the first 3 are technical, you know, stormwater management, agricultural practices, habitat restoration, and conservation. Those 3 areas are areas where your organization, your agency, might be directly engaged with planting, with planning, with engaging landowners, and so on. Or you may be more engaged around behavior change or public engagement around some of those things. Then the next 3 are a slightly different animal. The constituent engagement area is around how well organizations are able to partner, to engage constituents, whether that be through advocacy or whether that be behavior change or whether that be thinking about new audiences that they want to reach. Adaptive is an emerging, interesting area. What that word means to us is preparing for change. You know, there's a lot of change going on in our world, whether it's physical change like climate change, or whether it's social change, whether it's funding change, you know, all sorts of change motifs are upon us, as we all know. And so the ability to plan for that, to adapt to those changes, to foresee them, and to be prepared, to be resilient as an organization, that's what we mean by adaptive. And then finally, the program delivery support area has to do with a lot of mechanics of organizations. Obviously, you know, do you have legal help when you need that? Do you have a good financial internal system? Do you have an organizational structure, a succession plan, and all those kinds of things? And so that's what's meant there. So let's go to the next slide. So we asked people as an opening question on the survey, not to spoil anything for those of you that haven't taken the survey yet, but just a broad open end. Before we got into any of those technical areas that I just showed you, what is top of mind for you in terms of your organization's capacity needs and opportunities? So I'd like to invite you who are with us this morning to, again, use your chat and sprinkle in any of the, you see on the screen, things that are coming off the survey with the first 50 or so responses that we've got so far. These are some of the statements that people are making. I think it's interesting, the range of things that people are talking about. One of the things that we're trying to do with the survey is to not just default to the idea that, oh, we need more funding. We need more staff. You know, I think we all know that all organizations would do great work with additional financial capacity or additional people on their staff. This whole effort is meant to get beneath that, you know, kind of that top level need that everybody has, and look more specifically at the capacity areas that you're really thinking about. You know, these are, boy, GIS mapping expertise. We need that because that will advance this project that we have in mind, or this partnership we have with the county, or whatever it may be. Or HR support, you know, in this era where it's very hard to hire people or retain people, where everybody's rethinking everything, where salaries are chronically too low. HR support and guidance, the ability to recruit and retain staff is a capacity need that many organizations share. So now, or as we go forward, use that chat and let us know what some of your opening thoughts are. Like if you were answering this question on the survey, if you were sitting there on your Saturday morning with your cup of coffee looking at what is top of mind for you, what would you be saying? So as people do that, Drew, let's go on to the next slide.
Great.
And there it is. Okay, so that was just a placeholder to kind of encourage everybody to think about this question. So go ahead to let's go to the next. So I want to give you a little bit deeper sense of what we mean by these technical areas that I outlined a minute ago. So agriculture has got a number of possibilities under it, and we've aggregated those as you see here. And I've given 4 of, I think, the 6 areas that we're looking at, but it gives you a sense of some of the specifics within agriculture that we're looking at. So nutrient management, soil health, excluding livestock from streams, and supply chain issues, you know, encouraging agricultural producers to think about and engage with their supply chains and to hopefully look for greener, more sustainable methods there in supply chain. In the stormwater area, you know, our organizations, our partners are working in a whole variety of ways, as you can see here, and as you are probably doing, by installing or encouraging green infrastructure, by helping with permit compliance, making sure that those that are under MS4s understand their obligations and are meeting them, sometimes applying a little pressure in that area if necessary. Urban nutrient management, maybe reducing fertilizer use and other things like that. Pre-planting, a lot of you are probably engaged with, and certainly engaging property owners around all of these things. And then, you know, in the area of habitat, we have 4 main areas that we're thinking about: riparian buffers, living shorelines when you have a shoreline community, stream restoration, important everywhere, and wetland restoration. Of course, we're behind on the wetlands goals in the Bay Agreement, so that's critically important. So these are areas that are all addressed on the survey. Not every organization is engaged in all of these areas for sure, and so there's an opportunity to skip the ones that you're not engaged with. And then Drew, if we go to the next slide, yes, there's 2 more. So constituent engagement, there are 3 areas there that we're thinking about. One is advocacy, and you know, advocacy, and Drew, you should talk more about this because that's your guys' bread and butter. I mean, some of our organizations that are 501c3s are a little nervous about advocacy because they don't want to be political, you know, and they're worried about violating their charter with the IRS. And so, you know, we do need to think about that, but I think Drew could probably riff on that and why that's something that we encourage and I don't know if you want to say any words about that.
Yeah, I mean, another way to sometimes maybe the advocacy slash lobbying, those two words can scare folks. Another way to look at this is educating decision makers, whether it's at the local, state, or federal level. And do you have the, one of the capacities that we mentioned at the beginning wasn't just tools and resources, all those are important, but also relationships. Do you have the relationships to actually get connected to those decision makers and inform them about why XYZ policy is important, or why it's important to protect this this stream for these reasons, so that's what we're really getting at with the advocacy piece.
Great, yeah, and very important area. Behavior change, we want to engage people within the watershed to do things differently so that our waters are cleaner. And, there's 18 million people that live up and down the Bay watershed. So we have 18 million individual decision makers that are affecting water quality and the health of the surrounding land. And so we want to engage people and encourage them to adopt practices that will be better for the Bay and all of the streams that feed into it. And then reaching new audiences, what are we doing as organizations to challenge ourselves to reach out beyond the choir, the cadre of people that are really engaged and interested and paying attention compared to others that are out there in the community that we want to engage or should be engaging for a variety of reasons. So how much effort, how much capacity do we have to? In the adaptive area, there's four big categories that we're thinking about here. Climate change, of course, how are people thinking about, are you able to address, how is that factoring in both physically in terms of things like sea level rise and changing weather patterns, but also in terms of messaging, in terms of public worry and engagement and all those sorts of things that surround climate change. Very important areas we all know. And so what are we doing about climate change and how are we thinking about it? How is that factoring in to our work? And do we feel prepared in that area? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, or as our friends over in the Delaware Basin tend to call it JEDI, which I like a little bit better, right? But anyway, that's a critically important aspect of our work moving forward. The environmental movement for many years has been overwhelmingly white and is not representative of the broader community. So what are we doing? What are we able to do within our organizations to change that, to reach everybody, to be inclusive, to listen to every voice, to make people leaders, to elevate people and listen, and that sort of stuff. Collaborations and partnerships within our communities, within the environmental movement, and externally, what are we doing to partner with other organizations that might not be focused on the same issues? And how are we maybe moving a common agenda forward? But also within our movement, what are we doing to share resources, to maybe be cognizant of everybody else's position and needs and capabilities so that we're smart about how we divide up this big task. And then finally, planning, strategic planning, which is long range, and organizational planning, which might be more tactical. How well are we doing? What kind of capacities do we have in those areas? You want to add anything, Drew, to that slide?
No, I think you covered it really well.
So these are the big areas that we're thinking about. So let me give you the first look. This is just really high level and it's very early. We've only been in the field for a week. But in those 5 big areas that I just outlined, agriculture, stormwater, habitat, adaptive, rate the organization on this scale. Inactive. We are not addressing adaptive or whichever capacity area and have no plans to do so. Scaling back. We work in this area, but are likely to scale it back in the future. Maintaining, we're status quo. We plan to continue our current level, whatever it is. And then increasing, we want to increase our level of effort. So on the chart that you see, inactive is the red, of course. You can see the key at the top. Scaling back, maintaining, and increasing is in the bright spring grass green color. And so again, broad look, first look, but across the organizations that have responded so far, you can see that in ag, there's about 60% of the organizations that have responded that are active at some level in agriculture. And of those, a handful are scaling back, some are maintaining, but there's a very healthy group of 40% of that 60%, or 2/3 of them, that are looking to increase their attention, their capacities in the agriculture area. So that's something to pay attention to. Stormwater, even more dramatic, where 52% overall are looking to increase their capacity in the area of stormwater management work. 30% are maintaining what they're doing, probably doing a good job, keeping it going. And then 18% are not active in that area. Habitat, you can see there's a little bit less energy in terms of growth on the habitat side compared to the stormwater management side. And again, don't take this to the bank. This is week one of a like 8-week project or something, but it gives us a little sense of direction. Constituent engagement, I mean, I'm happy to see this, but we've got 9% inactive. The rest are active in some fashion. There will be exceptions to constituent engagement. We're never going to get to 100% because there are certain organizations that aren't positioned to do that. That's not their mission. But our funders are telling us, the funders are saying in the setup to this project that they would like to see more constituent engagement. They want to see organizations paying attention to their audiences and engaging them and bringing them in and expanding that tent. And so it's good to see the 56% that are thinking about increasing in that area. And then finally, adaptive, those change, the change capacity, adaptive capacity. So 90% are engaged, 3% are scaling that back for whatever reason, but most, and a really unbelievable 2/3 of organizations are thinking about adaptive capacity and addressing those adaptive capacities. And so that's a big area. So I want to just dive into that for a second. So let's go to the next slide, Drew. Within the adaptive area, as I said, we're looking at these 4 big, broad categories. And so we're asking people to tell us whether they work in this area of adaptive capacity or whether they consider themselves to be low, moderate, strong, or very strong. And so we're feeling pretty good about our collaborations and partnerships. We're feeling a little less good about our work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, although you can see that people are across the scale there. I see that it's 9:58, so I want us to move beyond this to our conclusion. We had thought about engaging you on a couple of questions, but should we just put these?
This fly by.
So
we're not going to ask this question to the group, to everybody, but just want to broach this question. If you were in a room with a funder, what would you say you need to accomplish your goals? So that's a fun scenario to think through, but the good news is that you actually have that opportunity to do it right now by completing the survey, because the funders are very involved not only in the construction of the survey, but they're going to be very involved in assessing the data that we get from it. So this is your opportunity to do just that, to make that dream come true. So
yeah, we're not going to share it with the funder, and this is specifically tied to your organization. So you should hold forth, be frank, and say what you want to say. It's going to be aggregated. So this is not like they're going to view if you have a constructive criticism for funders, or you're aggravated or impatient, that's okay. You should say that because this is, as Drew said, this is your opportunity to kind of let everybody know what is the area that people are not thinking about, or that you're thinking about that's next, that you urgently need people to pay attention. Anyway, go ahead, Drew.
And one thing I wanted to add too, and Steve mentioned this earlier in regards to the headwater organizations such as you all up in Upper Susquehanna, your opinion is particularly valued, not just by us as the Coalition, the Alliance, and OpinionWorks, but also by the funders. They've specifically mentioned how they're interested in learning or hearing from organizations that are working in headwater areas, given that they are typically under-resourced and don't receive as much attention and time and resources. So by completing the survey, you're really helping to fill a critical gap that we're trying to identify and learn. Real quick, I know we're at time here, but as we say, we share the survey link. Really appreciate you taking that. And then we're also going to be presenting a similar presentation, but we're going to be diving a little bit more into the details, and we'll have more results to explore at our workshop at the Chesapeake Watershed Forum next Friday. So please feel free to attend that if you're able to. Anything else you want to say to wrap up, Steve?
No, thanks for your time, everybody. It's wonderful to have you with us.
And last but not least, here are the contact information for Steve and myself. Please feel free to reach out with any questions. I'm sorry that we ran long and didn't have time to open up to Q&A, but please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to even just chat more about the project and learn more about what we're doing.
Thank you so much, Steve and Drew. And with that, Emily and I would like to wish everyone thank you and a fantastic time for the 2021 Watershed Forum. Thank you for joining for all of our sessions. And you can check out the Upper Susquehanna's page about the Watershed Forum to see all of the recordings from every one of our sessions and actually get connection information for any of our previous presenters. So Emily, anything else you'd like to say to everybody before we?
I think you covered it, Amy. I guess I did put the link to the Upper Susquehanna Coalition's page with the Watershed Wednesdays link there. All of this year's events are on there as well as all of last year's. So feel free to take a look at those. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. And thank you again, Steve and Drew, for a great presentation.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thanks.